Hi, I'm Lindsay Lewis, editor for Building Enclosure. I'm here with Blaine Siegel, Western U.S. sales leader for Building Envelope Solutions with Polyglass, to talk about designing and waterproofing horizontal surfaces. Blaine, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely, happy to be here.
So horizontal surfaces such as plazas and rooftop decks face constant exposure to weather and traffic. What are the biggest design challenges architects should be thinking about when we're waterproofing these types of assemblies?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say, in regards to weather, right? So you got to make sure you're picking the right membrane, make sure it's not exposed to a rain event, prior to the fact that it's got to cure typically during that process. So that'd be the first thing I'd say about the weather, and making sure that also during the actual install that, the temperature is in the right range of actually being able to, install that material. From a traffic perspective, I would say, what types of traffic are we looking at? Are we talking about, during the actual construction phase, or are we talking about after the construction phase, and what kind of traffic is going to be on it? So lots of things to consider there, whether it be, vehicular or pedestrian. During the actual construction phase, is the membrane need to be protected from, various types of equipment that's going to be rolling, around it the entire time of construction.
Now, what about UV radiation?
Yeah, UV radiation, very critical during the actual construction phase, something we absolutely have to keep an eye on. Pretty much all these materials need to be covered up ASAP. And so we're trying to make sure, depending upon the type of membrane that we selected, that it's staying within that range and it's not overexposed. Lots of times you do have the flexibility depending upon the weather and where the actual project is located. But overall, definitely something we want to keep an eye on and stay within that recommended range. And then, if we get into a situation where, all right, we're getting really close to that window, we get our tech team out there, take a look at the membrane, make sure we're still looking good, and then we can kind of move forward.
Now, when designing these assemblies, architects must balance waterproofing and drainage. Where do you most often see coordination breakdown during design or construction? Yeah,
I mean, one of the first things that we always recommend to architects when we have these conversations is ultimately requiring a pre-construction meeting. So key to have all the trades there and making sure that we have everything buttoned up prior to. We all know there's no perfect job out there, and there's going to be things that'll pop up from time to time. But as far as we're all aligned, from the very beginning, that's where we're in a really good spot to succeed. And like I said, things will change along the way. Details will change. There might be some RFIs along the way, but we want to make sure we get ahead of those to the best of our abilities.
Now, what about transitions to adjacent materials?
Yeah, great question, especially in horizontal conditions. I would say, when we're dealing with those, we're talking about different types of materials coming together. We're talking about, tying into potential expansion joints. Do we have the proper details in place? Are all those materials compatible and so forth? That's why we try to, work with manufacturers. If we don't have the potential material, we're able to tie into a material that we're comfortable with, and we already have a plan in action for that type of condition.
Now, let's talk about failures. So waterproofing failures often stem from incompatible components or poor sequencing during installation.
Right.
So my question is, why is a systems-based approach where membranes, insulation, protection layers, drainage, and surfacing are designed to work together so important? Yeah,
I would say, first of all, just kind of step back from a project perspective, right? There's no right membrane for every project. And so we want to analyze that. Just with our dry zone systems that we have at Polyglass, we've got our HRA. It's been around for decades. It's a great product, but it's not for every project. Then you have our MapSeal GC, a cold fluid applied product. Great product, a little bit of a cutting edge aspect to it, and kind of differentiates itself from the other competitors. And then I would say from our polyurea perspective, a newer engaging type of material that's in our space, that it has a lot of benefits. And so we want to analyze that first, all right? So which one of these is the best one for that actual project based upon timeline, cost, and so forth. And then we kind of break that down into partnering up with other manufacturers, how we're going to properly tie in, what do those transitions look like, and so forth.
Now, programs like Seal the Envelope emphasize integrated solutions, support, and coordinated warranties. So how do partnerships between manufacturers help architects reduce risk and simplify everything?
Of course. Just from our perspective and, kind of how we go to market, supports everything. You can have the perfect spec out there, you can have the perfect product specified. If you don't have the right team behind it, supporting it on your job site, keeping an eye on it, making sure things are going the right way throughout the entire process, that's where you can fail. And so from the Seal the Envelope perspective and the warranty that we actually will back up our projects on is going to the architect, hey, here's kind of our game plan for how we would attack this project. Here's what those transitions look like. We know they're compatible, and you have a single source, person to talk to essentially along the entire, construction process. And those critical areas, the below grade to the above grade, and what that looks like. What's that transition period? Are we going from one contractor to the next? Are we communicating with both sides? We all get in those situations. We've seen it time and time again within this space, specifically building envelope of going from one contractor to the next is a big part of it, right? there's a transition period, and then lots of times it's not only just the contractor, but it's also the manufacturer might be changing. So keeping that all in-house, having one person to blame, one person to point your finger at is huge. So yeah, I would say for the Seal the Envelope, we're trying to sell our Division 7 line into a project, not just bits and pieces.
Well, Blaine, thank you again for your time today.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
As always, head to buildingenclosureonline.com for technical and educational resources.
Thanks. Have a great day.